This is going to be the largest, craziest project I've turned yet. Have you ever had an idea for a project that just won't leave you alone? Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. I've got this idea for a project that I think can be really cool and a lot of fun. It's different than a bowl, but it's kind of like a bowl, and it's going to be really cool if it works out. But here's the problem. I don't have any wood here that's large enough or stable enough for this particular project. Now, I'm really blessed to have all kinds of trees around me that I get to turn. As you know, I like to turn trees into bowls, and you see that pretty frequently on this channel. But for this particular project, I don't have any bowl blanks or any slabs of wood large enough or stable enough. So I'm going to need to go purchase some wood for this. Stay with me here and I'm going to let you know what this project is. I think you're going to be as excited as I am to see how it turns out. But for right now, we need to go get some lumber. So let's go get the lumber and we'll get started on this project.
Actually, before we get the lumber, I need to determine how much lumber I need. So I'm going to lay this out on the computer. I'm making a 2-foot diameter cylinder that is going to be 5.5 inches thick. So I'm going to be using 2x6s. I thought it would take 2 8-foot long 2x6s, but I was wrong. I'm going to need 4. So I'm going to grab 4 really straight 2x6s and a couple 2x4s. Several of these 2x6s need to be cut to the same length. So I'm making a stop and I'm screwing this directly to my bench here, and then I'm going to use this to basically slide the pieces over and get the exact length each time with each cut. So I'm going to quickly go through these and cut this down. This is a lot more lumber than I was originally thinking, and it's a lot heavier. These 4 boards weigh almost 60 pounds. That's a lot of weight, but I'm pretty confident that my lathe will be able to handle it. So I'm going to continue ripping these down. Now, I couldn't cut these all to 2 foot. I would waste a lot of material, so I had to measure and make a few of them shorter so that I was saving on material. But here you can see all of the pieces laid out, just like the computer program. I carefully drew a center line and numbered each board to keep them in order.
If you're liking this video, do me a huge favor. Click that like button. It helps this video, helps the channel, and I thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Now I'm on to my 2x4s. I also need to make a 10-inch diameter cylinder. Now these 2 cylinders are going to be attached to one another. This is going to be one big turning. I'm doing the same thing where I'm making a stop block, and with these I'm going to cut them all to 10 inches. It'll make it that much easier. Taking the time to make a stop block like this really saves time and makes it really convenient. Plus it increases your accuracy too. Each one of these boards is going to be exactly the same length, which makes it really nice. And here are all the pieces that I need. Now I've taken this squeegee and I've cut a couple notches in that. I don't want to use the squeegee and put the glue down too thin, and those notches will allow some glue to remain in place. So I'm going to glue these up, and then I'm going to get them clamped nice and tight. And these guys are going to need to stay overnight to dry and cure. Now I'm going to move on to the great big 24-inch cylinder. Now that center line is really important here. It's going to help me line up each one of these with one another. This took quite a bit of time and a lot of glue. I used almost a half a gallon of glue to glue these up. I want to make sure there's glue on every surface because I don't know exactly where my turning is going to cut through, and I want to make sure that everything's attached really well to one another. Same thing, lining these up. I'm basically recentered that center line really well and then clamped it with all of my pipe clamps. And there it is. This is going to set up. So the next day I could take these clamps off. Some of them are glued in place a little bit. Just a whack with the mallet takes them out. Now I'm going to make a really simple measuring stick with 2 marks that are exactly 12 inches apart. And that's going to give me the ability to mark the 24-inch diameter on top of this glue up. So I'm going to bring the glue up back. And I'm going to check just to make sure. I'm going to find my center spot and I'm going to set a small nail there. This is going to be a guide. You drop that stick on it and run my pencil through it, and it will have a really nice clean 24-inch circle that I can use as a guide. This blank is huge. This is bigger than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so I'm going to run this through the bandsaw and clean that up. Now I'm not going right up to the line. I'm getting close to it, but not quite. I'm going to leave some extra material there so that I can turn down to that line. This thing is really heavy. Okay, so I'm going to take the clamps off the 2x4. I'm going to mark the center on this. And this is a 10-inch diameter. I'm going to go ahead and mark that and also run it through the bandsaw and clean it up. You can see there how I'm leaving a little extra material outside the drawn line. So what is it that I'm making? Well, I am making a coin funnel. And I've been digging around and I've been trying to find information on the shape of this, and I found this really great website, and look at that. There's all the diameters, the dimensions that I need. Yeah, right. That's not going to help me much. But there was this really great graph, and look at this. It's in proportions of fifths. 5 proportions over and 5 proportions down. So here is the profile of my 24-inch by 5.5-inch cylinder. And if I take and I put equal proportions, 5 blocks from the center out and 5 blocks from the center down, and I make an arcing curve here, I essentially have the shape that I need to cut. So I'm also going to draw a block at the bottom to represent the 2x4 by 10-inch, and then the outside of the shape, and we're pretty much there. Now the very bottom, I need to move this over a bit because there's not enough width for a coin or a quarter to fit through. So I want to slide that over just a touch. Now I can print this out, and it doesn't quite fit on a standard sheet of paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tile this, and I'm going to print out multiple sheets that'll have the same graphic, but it will be at 100%. So I can take these 3 printouts and overlap them to create one final template. So I'm going to trim out the edges of this, and I'm going to use the lines and very carefully overlap them with one another. And then I'm going to use some spray mount. The spray mount adhesive will allow the paper to stick to one another. Spray the back of the top one, and just very carefully lining this up exactly where it needs to be. And what this is going to do, this is going to give me a 100% to scale template for taking measurements and shaping the ramp or the inside funnel of the coin funnel. So now I'm going to start with the base. The base is going to be the 10-inch cylinder. I'm going to mount this to the lathe using the faceplate. I'm going to take my time, make sure this is really well centered, and drive in all of the screws. Faceplate is a great way to have a really stable connection to the lathe. Okay, so this is going to be the bottom of the entire coin funnel. So I need to flatten it. Just going to do a really clean push cut across the surface here. Now, I didn't plane any of this wood. Didn't have to get really fancy with it. I could have run it through a planer and cleaned it all up. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten these surfaces right now. And that'll make sure that everything is flat and smooth, that is going to be glued together later. Just want to take your time and make a really clean, straight push cut. The other thing with the building lumber like this is there's a lot of resin in it, so you really want to be sharpening your tools frequently. This is great material to practice on too. If you're just learning how to turn bowls, go get yourself some 2x6s and make some bowl blanks and just practice. because this is really tricky wood to cut cleanly. The end grain wants to rip out very, very easily. So it's a really good wood to practice with. If you can cut this well, you can cut basically any wood very well. And it's cheap. That's the best part. I'm always feel bad when people get excited about turning their first bowl and they buy an expensive wood species bowl blank. And the problem with that is that there's a good chance that your skills aren't up to speed yet, and you're probably going to ruin that blank. So instead of ruining a really nice bowl blank, get yourself some building material or some cheap scrap wood like this and really practice honing your skills. Just work on your technique, maybe turn a few bowls, but once you feel comfortable that you have all the techniques down, then use a more interesting piece of wood to turn on, and you'll probably have a lot better results as well. As you can see here, as I'm getting down to the final diameter, I'm making a slower pace cut, and that's going to also help refine that and make a smoother cut and prevent tear out. I'm also going to turn this around and just round off that corner so it's not sharp. Now, this is my big 4-jaw chuck. This is a 5-inch jaw. I'm going to mark that. Now remember, this is going to be the bottom of the entire coin funnel. If you ever played with a coin funnel when you were a kid, you know how cool those were. You watch that coin go around and around and around, and then it would just disappear. Well, that's what we're making, and I've wanted to do one of these for a long time. I don't even know if it's possible. Now, part of the reason that got me excited about doing this was I had some bowls that had kind of a coin funnel shape to them, and coins would roll around the perimeter of them pretty well, but not so great. So I have no idea how precise I need to be for this to make this work well. I'm hoping that the shape that I found online, which I'll include a link to that webpage if you're interested in it, I'm hoping that graphic and the size is going to be enough to get me close to what will work well with this. Now, I'm actually turning a recessed mortise here. You don't see me do this very often, but there's a particular reason. I'm going to have a hole going right through the center of this piece. So I don't want to be putting pressure on that opening or that hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill this out. So I can see at this point, 1 5/8 inches down from the top part is a 1-inch diameter. At the very bottom is 3/4 inch. Well, that's for 1/2 or a profile. So I need 1.5 inch bit here, and this will be the very bottom of the coin funnel is 1.5 inch diameter. This also means this is the narrowest point of the entire funnel. So in theory, I could drill this 1.5 inch drill all through the entire thing, but I don't have to do that. I'm going to drill this up about halfway or 3/4 of the way up into this piece and clear out that material. Let that go too long, they will bind up in there and the piece will spin. You also want to make sure you're holding the Jacob's chuck so that the drill bit doesn't spin in the tailstock. Okay, so with that, the bottom portion of this piece complete, I'm going to take the faceplate off. Now I can mount the bottom of the coin funnel. Doesn't look like one yet. The coin funnel into the 4-jaw chuck. Now I'm going to clean up the other side of the 10-inch cylinder. Again, we're just making a very light push cut, keeping a lot of down pressure on the tool rest and shifting my body weight forward. I am not moving my hands or arms. I'm just shifting my body weight forward, making sure that I'm riding the bevel. Now, if you're curious about riding the bevel, I've got a video that explains what riding the bevel is all about. You might want to check that out. Now, this surface will glue to the other piece, so I want to make sure that's nice and smooth. And I'm going to check this 1 5/8 inch down. I can drill a 2-inch diameter hole. Now, I don't want to go farther than that because then I will be into the narrower part of the bottom of the funnel. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm doing the very bottom portion of the funnel first, which is actually pretty nice to be able to do it in this section. This being a 2x4, this is only 3.5 inches thick, and it's pretty easy to work the wood from top to bottom here. Now, if this were part of the entire funnel, it's going to be a little trickier to get down inside there and work that and get the angle just right. Again, just take your time and let the Forstner bit do the cutting. All right, we can back that out. It's starting to take shape. So that bottom rectangle is the 2x4, and I can measure here that at the very top of that 2x4, the funnel should be exactly 2 3/4 inch wide. So I'm going to mark that, and that's going to be where I start. And see, I need to basically angle from that mark down through the sections inside that I've already turned away. Now it's going to be a little tricky to reach that with the bowl gouge, so I'm going to switch to a scraper. This will probably be the most difficult or tricky part to reach of the entire piece, which isn't too bad if you think about it. So I'm carefully going to remove this material. I'm angling the scraper towards the wall so that it scrapes cleaner. And then I'm going to use a dowel rod with some sandpaper wrapped around it, and I'm going to clean up the inside of that angled funnel. Going to get it as smooth as I can. There you can see the ripped out end grain. It is really tricky wood to turn as far as the tear out. But it's also soft and it's easy to sand and to work with as well. All right, now we're going to move on to the monster blank. I'm going to be using my large 6-inch face plate with this piece. And now you might be thinking, how in the world is this going to mount to your lathe? I have a robust Sweet 16 lathe, and it's actually pretty cool because it has an 8-inch swing, but it also has a 16-inch swing when you move this section of the lathe bed out of the way and off to the side. So now I can actually turn a 32-inch piece. This is only 24 inches, so I've got quite a bit more room that I could actually turn here if I wanted to. You really want to hold this in place with, even with the small blanks, you want to make sure you hold them in place and turn the hand wheel to tighten the headstock onto the faceplate. If you turn the blank itself, there's a good chance that you're going to damage the threads on the headstock. This is definitely the biggest piece I've ever put on my lathe. It is massive, and the lathe speed is relatively slow. I don't know what my RPMs are here because I do not have an RPM readout on this, but I know that the speed is under what would be considered dangerous. I'm bringing it up just a little bit here, but because of the size of this piece, you do not want to turn that speed up. It will become very dangerous at a faster speed. I've got a video all about lathe speed. You might want to check that out as well. It's really important to know that with wood bowls, you do not turn as fast as you do when you're turning a spindle turning. You will run into trouble if you try turning a wood bowl at the same speeds that you can turn a spindle turning. And that video basically explains all the details of why. Now I'm working across this slowly, and I'm basically just leveling it out. I'm looking down the side too to make sure that I've got this going nice and straight and flush. Okay, now I'm going to mark the 10-inch location where the other piece is going to glue onto this, just so I know where I'm at. Now I can see this bottom section is what needs to be removed. This is going to be the bottom portion of the coin funnel, and we don't need that, so I can start removing that. Basically the same way that I shape the exterior of a bowl, but this is a little more controlled, and we've kind of have a rough design that we're going by. This portion of the turning is more aesthetics and the look that we want to create for the exterior. When it comes to the interior or the top, which is going to be the funnel, we need to turn very precisely. So it's going to be completely different then. And then we'll be using the template to take measurements and make sure that the top is matching the design that we laid out on the computer so that we have that shape that ideally will work well for a coin funnel, hopefully. I have no idea if this is going to work. I think it will, but I'm not 100%. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And this is a little bit slow because we have to keep the RPMs down for a piece to safely turn at this size. And you have to remember, when you have something this large and this heavy, this was almost 60 pounds when I started. This is a huge flywheel. You have to be very, very cautious with this. If you get the lathe speed up too high, you're going to see vibration. Hopefully that's all you see. At that point, you should back down on the speed. If that vibration continues, has the potential to walk the lathe around your shop and potentially do other things that aren't so great. So you just want to make sure you keep your lathe speed down, especially with larger pieces like this. So I'm working that angle. It's going to go from the 10-inch diameter cylinder that's going to glue onto this one up to the corner in the top portion of this. I'm making slow passes. Now this is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. My go-to bowl gouge. You guys have probably heard me talk about this before, obviously. This is used primarily for roughing, my 5/8 inch 55-degree. And I'm just trying to remove material right now. I'm not trying to make a really smooth surface. I don't want to tear up the wood horribly, but I can become a little bit more aggressive with the roughing gouge, and it removes a little bit more material than the smaller 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. That bowl gouge I use more as finishing cuts, where I'll go a little bit slower, I'll reduce my pace, and I'll make a really clean final cut over the surface. Now you can see here I went back and had to return to that cut, and the reason being is I was making a cut that was a little bit too deep, and I was actually slowing down the lathe. Because of a larger piece like this, you can actually gain an upper hand and slow down the lathe if you apply too much pressure, too much force. I am applying quite a bit of force here to rough out this material. So if you feel the lathe slow down, then you can back up on your cut or ease the depth of the cut so you're not removing so much material. Here you can see the profile and the shape that's being created. I'm cutting away that bottom triangular corner of material we don't need. The other nice thing about doing this is it's going to reduce the weight of the piece quite a bit. Just want to take your time and just move across there one pass at a time. You can see I'm kind of inching my way towards that 10-inch diameter that I drew on the bottom of this blank. You definitely want to wear dust protection. I'm wearing my 3M dust mask at this moment. Make sure that I'm not inhaling any of these particles. I got to tell you, this wood is really painful too. You would think that all of the other things that we've turned, the oak and all that, would be bad, and some of them can be, but the splinters coming off this pine is miserable. I have splinters all over in my hands, and I've just got all kinds of different things that it's just not fun. I was kind of surprised. I figured this would be softer and easier. It is softer, but it's a little more difficult for a couple different reasons. The splinters coming off. It also has a resin in it that is making me need to go over to the sharpening station more often than I expected. But once you have your sharpening station set up, it's nice to be able to just walk back over there and in a few seconds put a nice sharp edge back on your tool and come back to the lathe, and you really see the performance difference between a sharp tool and a slightly dull tool. And this is where that glove comes into play. You can see as some of those shavings are riding the flute right up into the side of my hand, depending on what angle I'm at. That's where you get into trouble. Not only do they lay splinters into the side of your hand, but they're hot as well. So I'm going to take a moment and put that sharpened edge on the tool that I just mentioned. If you need to know more about sharpening your tools, or if you'd like to set up a sharpening station like mine and learn how to sharpen all of your wood bowl turning tools and shape them as well. This is another big one. If you want to turn or try out the 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, then check out my tool sharpening course. We go over all the details for shaping tools to whatever shape you would like and for maintaining their sharpness. So check out that course. This is all real time. I haven't sped this up. I didn't slow it down. That's all you need to do at the sharpening station to put a really nice sharp edge back on your tool. You can see a little bit of vibration happening there. If I'm getting some vibration, I really want to make sure that I'm riding the bevel, number one. I want to make sure the heel is not rubbing. That means that the angle of the tool and where the handle is positioned, I make sure that that's gliding along with the parallel surface of the bowl. And then if I'm still getting some vibration or motion, I want to put extra pressure down with my left hand into the tool rest, and that usually will stop the bowl gouge from bouncing around. Now I'm making some pretty deep cuts here, and then I have to kind of stop and then lessen the depth of each one of those cuts. And that's okay. I'll come back and reset each one of those and basically clean them all up. The shavings are really piling up at my feet here at this point. So you can see what I was doing there. The initial cut was pretty deep. I basically changed the angle of the profile of the bowl to shape it a little bit more. But as I would proceed, the cut would become deeper and deeper. So then I would have to back out a little bit of the cut to make the cut a little less deep. And so we have these kind of staggered tiers or terraces along the surface. So I'm just picking up each one of these and then cutting that back out to the edge. So I will essentially make that initial really deep cut like I wanted to, but I just have to do it in stages. That's essentially what a catch is. When you overwhelm your bowl gouge, you can have a really controlled catch where you're just gradually pushing it into material where it becomes too much for the gouge to keep up with. Or you can do it all at once, very abruptly, where the tool just can't cut the surface quick enough to move the material out of the way, and it catches. It's just that simple. So a catch, they can be scary. You can have some scary catches, and it's a little intimidating, especially at first. But really, if you think about it, the only thing that's happening with a catch is just wherever the tip of the bowl gouge is, it's being overwhelmed. There's too much material for it to remove all at once. So if you learn to make lighter passes or slow your pace and let the tool cut a little bit more efficiently, you're going to reduce the chance of getting catches. And the more you turn with the bowl gouge and you get a feel for what it can do and what it can't do, the catches kind of disappear after a while, because you know when you're pushing too hard or you're expecting too much out of the bowl gouge. Now here you can see I have the base of this turned down to that pencil line. That's our 10-inch diameter. And that's where we're going to attach the other cylinder to this coin funnel. Now, I got to tell you, I think it was in the malls. You know, as a kid, you would see those great big plastic coin funnels, and you always go asking your parents for coins and see if you could put them in there. And it was always fun, and I always thought that was a blast. And I had turned an OG bowl that was pretty good sized quite some time ago, and it had a really nice gradual slope on it, and it almost worked as a coin funnel, but the coins didn't really follow the path too well. So I'm kind of excited about this because I want to have some fun with this, and I want it to be similar to the experience I remember as a kid with those great big coin funnels. The other thing that's pretty funny is actually that website that I had found this information about the math or the shape of this, they're selling plastic coin funnels, and they're relatively small. And I've seen some of those, and they're nice and everything, but the coin just drops down way too quick. It's just not quite as fun as those great big ones were. So that's what's got me pretty excited about this. So we'll see how it turns out. The shape of the outside of it's really coming along nicely here. Quite happy with that. And it's cutting pretty smooth. I've still got some marks there that need to be dealt with. Now I'm going to smooth this out. Now this is going to be the bottom of the top portion, and the hole in the center needs to match the hole from the previous, or from the piece that's going to get glued on there. Well, we drilled out a 2-inch hole in the other piece, and we can do the same here. We could drill out a 2-inch hole, and those are going to match very closely to one another. But before we do that, I'm going to actually move my tool rest out to this outside arm now. That's a cool thing about this lathe, is I have the ability to take that section out, and I can move it on the side here so I can bring the tool rest around, or I can actually add it to the end of the lathe and make my bed longer if I want. Yes, this lathe is called the Sweet 16. It's pretty cool. So it has an 8-inch swing, which gives it a 16-inch diameter turning when everything is put in place like normal. And then when you pull that section out like I've done here, then it goes to a 16-inch swing, which means you can turn a 32-inch piece or turning on this. You do have the limited space. It's about a 10-inch space there that you can turn, and then depending on the size of your 4-jaw chuck or whatever attachment device you have in there will determine how much material you can get between or inside that space. So I'm just cleaning up the outside edge here, taking my time to make a really nice clean pass. And again, this is that simple building material pine that the end grain will tear out very easily. So you want to take your time and make a really light, very intentional cut here so you don't rip out those end grain fibers. You can see how much slower I'm moving here with the finishing cut versus the roughing cuts from before. Now I'm going to curve that and blend the bottom portion into the side portion. Again, light cuts, slow pace, all body motion. I'm not moving my hands and arms here. This is my body twisting around. I'm shifting on my knees, basically. I've got my knees relaxed and I'm shifting around that curve. Now I'm going to use a shear scrape to really smooth out those transition areas and make this nice, clean, round exterior portion of this. I'm leaving the bottom a little beefy too, because I don't want this thing to be thin. I want it to have some bulk to it. So I have the same bit from the previous piece, and I'm going to use that to drill out the center of this. That way those center holes should match with one another when we get these mounted together. And take my time. Again, hold that Jacob's chuck and let the material, make sure that material is coming out. If you're not getting material coming out, you're going to start burning the bit and you might have some issues. So you want to back out and get all those shavings out before you go too deep. And keep the shavings cleared and you'll be in good shape for this. So for this top portion, this hole will be the narrowest at any point. It's only going to get wider from here going up to the very top of the piece, which is pretty much open. Now I've got this really cool tool, and I don't even know the name of this. This essentially is designed for mounting something to the tailstock just for what I'm doing right now, for mounting purposes. It is not rotating. There's no bearings on this. so it will not spin. So you want to make sure you do not turn on the lathe at this point. This is essentially being used to line up the two pieces, and it's going to work out great because I can get those two holes perfectly centered. Okay, so I'm going to apply a very liberal amount of glue, and I'm going to spread it around because I want to make sure there are no voids. I want to make sure there's glue everywhere. And then I'm going to bring the two pieces together, and I'm going to apply pressure with the tailstock and use that as a clamp to keep these two in place, and they're going to need to dry overnight.